So, death the licensing. That's the game, isn't it? Yeah. So lock the doors. Everybody stay. We're having a good chat here. So, look, at the end of the day, it's all about cash, right? Local councils don't have any money, and we've obviously taken that into account here. Like, look, we all want rid of license. I run a licensing company. Let's not get about it too much. So look, at the end of the day, we need to get rid of it in some way. That's what we want to do, but ultimately we aren't there. So the group have taken that into account, and essentially, like over time, we do want to get rid of it with the PRS database, with a kind of reduction in various other aspects of selective licensing, which will take you through the proposals. But at the end of the day, we have a very confusing system. We have geographically, we have an issue where we have multiple councils doing different things. They all run essentially localized small businesses, and we need to kind of pull it all together and essentially make it more efficient. So we talked about things around looking at, look, it's all about money, but from our group's perspective, we looked at going, well, it's not about revenue. I know they're not allowed to make profit, but revenue is vanity, profit is sanity. If only my FD hear me say that, that would be fantastic. But at the end of the day, we're not trying to come with proposals that are eventually going to knee-jerk react and go, that's a terrible idea, where's all the money coming from? We're looking at ways to save money, looking at ways to make enforcement better, and looking at ways to make the whole system work a little bit cleaner so that everybody knows what we're doing. We know where we need to apply and not apply. We know what conditions there are. We know how much it's going to cost. We know that our money isn't getting wasted. That's the main thing. So that's essentially what we came up with. Obviously, licensing for people that don't really understand it comes in three forms. Mandatory licensing, which is mandatory. We have additional licensing, which is additional to mandatory licensing, but is also mandatory. We have selective licensing, where it was pretty much selective. It is also mandatory, but it's no longer selective, because last year was removed the part where it was selective, and now it's just an absolute free-for-all, including Westminster, where 90% of the borough now need selective licensing. It doesn't make any sense. So we've taken this into account, and don't shoot the messenger. This is what we came up with. So let's click some buttons. Oh, that's amazing. So this wasn't all our doing. This came up here. There was lots of people involved. Jesus gave us the opportunity or opportunity to kind of pull this together and put some great minds into the room. These are the people that made it to the end. Most people fell asleep or left. But these are the people that really kind of brought it together. And obviously Sandra helped to do things as well that were essentially, she did the words up, terrible words. So as you might know. So essentially, land licensing, standardization, centralization, right? Regs have one place where everybody applies. It's genius, really, isn't it? Rather than having 300 odd different systems of bits of paper and schemes and all the rest of the stuff, let's just have one place where everybody can apply. It's very simple. Let's make sure that once you get a license, that we talked about standardizing terms. Essentially, okay, look, we know that local councils maybe have local things that they want to do, and that some of the terms in the license have to be there for certain reasons. But collectively, we think we can come up with a little menu that comes up with, here's the stuff that you can put in at the start, here's the stuff that you can pick from, this is how it's written down, this is how it's laid out, and it makes it easy for everybody to understand, so that when you're going crossing councils and boundaries and all the rest of the stuff, what you get in the license says roughly the same thing, or says the same thing in some ways from the menu of options, and it's not confusing. The hardest part of this is it's really confusing when you actually need to apply what the license says, etc., etc. So that's where that came from. Selective licensing, as we talked about, we want to get rid of it in the long run, but we know that this government doesn't like that idea. But what we've done is we said, right, well, how about, because we obviously as an industry, we're kind of seeing that everybody's like, this PRS thing's a load of nonsense, let's make some money in short lets. But now obviously they're bringing in C5 to capture that. So we think that licensing should also include short lets as a little kind of exchange. So we need to get them a little bit safer, but we need to reduce selective licensing. So should be selective in its location, but short-term lets should be included in licensing. Selective licensing, bring it back to its intended use. These few streets over here are doing naughty things, and we need to crack down on that. Not let's make £30 million out of Westminster landlords just because it's cash. You know, that's the kind of idea. PRS database, obviously there's a TLIC PRS database working group, there's a UPRN working group, there's the ROPA working group, and some other working groups. Anyway, we're going to have all the working groups together chatting about things in the future to kind of pull it in. But high level, we should all be using UPRNs. We should all have gas and electrical linked to these UPRNs. We should have a public register for that. And then magically, we should connect the database and the licensing system together and make it seamless. That all kind of makes sense. Then from applications, so we should at least be able to apply before you're breaking the law. Some councils think it's a good idea that day one you can now apply, day two you're breaking the law, and then their system falls apart because everybody tries to apply. It's an absolute disaster. Also fees, look, have some standardization. We looked at it and went, okay, there's a lot of variables here. Look, if we look at fees, look, here we're talking Westminster, it's £985 or whatever it is for a selective license. Seems like a lot, but then you go against, and it's £1,250 for a selective license. Doesn't make sense, you know, with the value of the rent, the enforcement, all these things don't really make sense. But we'll put some guidelines in place. We did try to look at standardization of fees completely, but it really depends on how much. So if you look at, like, you bring in an additional scheme or a selective scheme, it's going to depend on how many properties are inside that geographical location. Is there 10? Is there 20? Is there 10,000? So how much revenue are you going to bring in? How many staff are you going to need to do that? You've got basic level, etc., etc. So there's too many variables, but we think we can make it obviously a little bit more standardized. But the key to all the other elements of this is that it's more efficient, so we can actually spend less money, or we can save money on fees basically. Could charge them less because we've got efficiency. That's the idea. Flexible installments, pay it up, pay plan, sounds like a good idea. So essentially, rather than charging me £1,000 and then I'm going to sell it in 3 months' time, how about we pay it £200 a year or some sort of flexibility around that? Plus, councils are useless. They're like a teenager with, you know, it's like, oh yeah, we've got £1,000, let's spend it. And then a year and a half later, like, we're not going to so then they're like, oh no, what are we going to do now? So yeah, they get loads of money and then they spend the money and then they decide, okay, it's a good, now what we need to do is more money, so let's just charge more money. They're not actually looking at going, how can we make everything a lot more efficient and how can we spend money wisely? And that's kind of what the group kind of looked at and proposed. Well, what was it doing? Stop and move on. Let's keep talking, right? Sorry. That was the next thing, right? It was, yes, collaboration between councils. Licensing and planning is an absolute disaster. We're seeing a massive increase in Article 4 HMO planning schemes. People don't know about it. Landlords are like, this is silly. Why have I applied for this, but I need to apply for this as well? And you didn't tell me. Now you've issued me a 1-year license and I also need planning permission, which shouldn't you told me about at the start? And they're like, it's a different department. And you're like, that's ridiculous. So then why don't they talk together? And when you apply for a license, it tells you need Article 4 HMO planning permission. And both these councils, departments are notified at the same time and they actually have a little discussion. So that seems like a good idea as well. Registers, load of nonsense. So councils have registers for when a license is granted. Okay, so that's useful, but it's only about 82% correct anyway. And you only get a license at some point when the council want you to get a license. So like it could be a week, it could be 2 years. So a register of granted licenses that isn't actually correct is a little bit useless. So let's have a register that is correct, but also have applied for licenses as well. So when somebody applies, it says somebody has applied for this license. And then essentially from a kind of property management perspective, we can actually see who's actually compliant to having applied for a license, which is beneficial for all. Training, audits, enforcement. No worries. Right, so regular audits on councils' licensing schemes. Can't remember how we're going to enforce that, but yeah, let's make sure they're actually following the rules. Certified checklists, property MOT, TLIC working group, working with them on that, and then expert inspections. There was a lot of chat around this. So as the last presenter alluded to, I think it was Jackie Peacock in our group that said there's roughly 2.2 environmental health officers per 10,000 PRS properties. So that's never going to work, is it? So we don't have room for enforcement. And then all these license schemes are built on the charging model. We're charging you £1,000, but it's okay. We need to send somebody out to your property to check it out, and then nobody ever comes. So again, it's just charging for stuff that's not actually going to happen. So we're looking at Southampton. Peter Littlewood brought into the discussion that Southampton had a really good model where they had surveyors do a pre-inspection. So essentially, you could pay less for your licensing. Let's say, for example, £300 less for your licensing if you've had a qualified RIC surveyor assess the property and ensure that there was no Cat 1 and Cat 2 hazards and that you complied to the HMO or licensing guidance for that council. And then it was a little bit cheaper and it worked really well. So you would take that money and give it to the surveyor. So ultimately not cheaper for the landlord, but means that we can actually ensure that the whole point in the scheme is of making properties safer actually happens. And then it was like, well, surveyors are not allowed, don't really want to do it because it's beneath them, was the kind of thing. So essentially then we're look at environmental health officers. So environmental health officers, RIC surveyors, and then we're looking capacity behind that. Will it actually work? Who knows? So then we looked at, okay, well, we could have the industry services provide a service if they have carried out the correct training. So HSSRS training done by Charles.
Excited to help you get.
Sorry. So yeah, that's what we looked at with the HSSRS training. And then essentially we can have inspections done by the relevant people that have some sort of training. And then last but not least, ROPA working group, mandatory landlord and agent training. Tenant training was discussed, but it was quickly thrown out. Access to, it was hilarious. Access to education was via probably the PRS database was the thing. Right, no question? Fine.
It was quite interesting how so many of the points. It was quite interesting how so many of the points link in with the last presentation. So finding a way that tenants can get that information, even if we aren't going to educate them, they at least need to know, and there needs to be somewhere where they can find out. Likewise with where's the money coming from? If you just took £46 from every database, you would have what you need in order to actually do this as well, to do the inspections. So I think we need those slides.
Oh yeah, we've got the slides. We'll feel all that information.
Yeah.
Right, just elaborate is the word you wanted, Paul.
3, you can't have 3 like that.
Elaborate with that information is what you want rather than steal.
First of all, future-proofing. So I know there'll be different opinions in this room about supporting local licensing or going national. But there is an intermediate. The government's looking at devolution. We know that, if the government takes everything centrally, they don't always do the best job. Universal credit works really well, doesn't it? Not. And we also know that there's so many different local authorities, each with a different agenda, each with different resources. Now, the government is working on a devolution programme, good, bad, or indifferent. Have you looked at future-proofing your studies to see if that would be a more appropriate level to start looking at a strategic, rational system of controlling the type of housing within a region rather than in an area? Number 2 point was very quickly, David pointed on it. What happens if local authorities don't collect this money? is it still too cumbersome? The number of times we see big fines being put forward, and then 2 years later they're still appealing them through, and it costs more for the local authority to collect that money than it actually does to get received from it. And the last point is it achieving what it's achieving, and that is better housing for the future, or is it really just a situation that they are basically collecting money and not actually improving the accommodation that they actually have? And that will mean that with the register coming in, that's a way of cross-referencing rather than replacing, and also helping the landlords understand with using the databases and everything, the technology that's coming in, and also largely the 1 point. Yeah, it's that ultimately the sorry.
I can't remember.
Just for a second.
Yeah.
No.
You answer that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we did look at that, and one of the reasons for the centralisation, and again, whether you think right or wrongly, it's similar to what they tried to do with the trading standards, and not for the actual visits or the inspections, but have a centralised area to deal with standardisations and enforcement, and to provide extra services. That's what we were looking at doing. So then if devolution happens and it goes out at a regional level, having an overall standardisation body that sits at a corporate level, at a government level, but without actually needing to do the work, but provide the guidance and assurity, would future-proof it against that. And onto your second one, we spent far too long debating that. There is no real, I would say, definitive evidence as of yet that licensing has been applied correctly to raise standards. However, that is still what the government is proposing, and that is their objective. And there was no real benefit for us in actually putting proposals that completely go against that. They have such a majority that actually, if we want to be seen to be collaborating, we have to go with the essence and how do we help them get to a situation where in the future, by doing this, we will be able to see if it's improved standards. We will be able to see if selective is being used correctly. Because at the moment, with 300 disparate systems that have different pricing, different rules, different areas, nobody really knows. So by putting in something standard, maybe in 5-10 years' time, you could actually look back and see what it's actually done for housing. I think that was the first goal, as what Paul was saying around, let's get efficiency, let's get standardization, let's get something that is actually workable, that we can use, and if it's not doing the right goals, actually get the different arguments other than what people say, is this just a money grab? We actually want to see, can we put in a system which will show us if this is actually affecting housing standards, which is the ultimate goal that they're looking to do.
With regard to your point about fines and enforcement, there is a mechanism within the RRB that allows for money from the database to be ring-fenced for specific things, one of which could be for licensing, and that would allow us to actually spend money on enforcement. So we could get the fines in, and then it starts to become a circle.
Thank you. It's a great idea for all councils to work together, but this legislation came out over 20 years ago, and they will never actually work together. We know that. We know that this is all about empire building, and that's how councils generally work. And I speak as a councillor with 13 years experience behind me. So I just wonder how you want to get the councils to work together. And then the second one is on LGR, which is a big hot topic at the moment, certainly within my own local authority in our county. As it was admitted by Angela Rayner before she got sacked, that it was never costed and it's too expensive and it simply will not work. So it's going to be interesting to see how that is actually going to be panning out, because I think that there will be a new government in before that ever actually rears its ugly head, to be totally honest.
Yeah, so the proposals are that a single local authority take control of the application process with a digital online system, and set out the various criteria that can be applied by local councils at a local level to the specific licensing. So they less need to work together. We just need one system and one process. And then essentially, once the application is submitted correctly with all the documentation, then it will go to the local councils to control their own licensing enforcement.
Have you spoken to local authorities? Did you get any buy-in on this?
Spoken to-
It is very much empire building, no.
Spoken to 5, 3 in central London and 2 home counties. And they are absolutely up for it because they are sinking under the weight of the licence applications that are coming through, and they're not being able to process them in a timely manner, which is becoming problematic. So they said yes, in principle, having a central body or a central one local authority to deal with the applications, as long as the majority of the money, less what it costs them to deal with, comes back out to them, and the day-to-day enforcement comes back out to them. That's only 5. It was just a soundbite, but they were absolutely up for it because they could see the benefits.
It's a quick one because
Just an analogy for that would be the planning board, which is a standalone organisation where you can submit a planning application and they'll submit it to any council.
Thank you
thank
for
you
the
very much, guys. Well done. Thank you.